Everybody knows me. I'm Councillor Steve Hayes, member for Swanwick, and I'm chairman for this evening. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence.
Mr. Chairman, we've got apologies from Councillor Brown and Councillor Smith.
Okay, thank you. Right, let's crack on. Basically, I'd like to thank you all for coming this evening and giving us the opportunity. I think we've not had the opportunity to explain. We're going to try and, all the officers are going to try and explain why we're in the position we're in, why all you and myself think that this is not what we want in Swanwick. I appreciate what you're saying, but having said that, there are ways and means of getting to where we've got to be, and this is actually the way to do it. So, really speaking, we've got. I've had a couple of emails from Mr. Briggs Jr. with regards to his video camera. So we as a group have no problem with it, as long as it doesn't disrupt the meeting as such. So I'm presuming it's not going to do, so we haven't got a problem with it. The officers now will, I think Robert will give you a presentation. We've got a presentation up on the board. I would like you not to sort of interrupt Robert, because all those people that have sort of said they're going to speak, we've got Mr. John Briggs. He's the #1 speaker, if you like. So John will get 5 minutes. Then we've got Mr. John Payne, Peter Staton, Dennis Fretwell, Mike Vagan, Mark Hogg, Matt Spencer, and we've got the gentleman in the blue coat. I can't actually read his signature.
Oh, it's Howard Hall.
Howard Hall. They're the speakers for this evening. I'll just make a...
Right.
No, if you could, just give Robert his time to explain, then you've all got, sort of time to speak, and then we've got a question and answers. So if you don't actually finish what you're saying, then we've got a question and answers as well afterwards. So there's not going to be a rush. It's your night to tell us, and we're going to try and tell you why we're doing it the way we are. Okay? Right. Thank you, Bob.
Evening. Right, I thought I'd firstly run through the process. I'm concentrating on, obviously, the purposes of this presentation on strategic sites for housing. So I just thought I'd quickly run through the core strategy process there is in relation to allocating strategic sites for housing. You all heard about the strategic housing land availability assessment, otherwise known as the SLAR. That isn't so much part of the core strategy process. It's an ongoing requirement of the government that we keep on a database a list of all potential housing sites, no matter how large, no matter how small, no matter what. It doesn't imply in any way any support for that site. It just that's a requirement. So that's one of the sources of information we use when we look to see what potential housing sites there are. You will also recall the consultation on options for housing growth that we undertook from July to September last year, that gave 16 different options for strategic sites in the borough. And where are we now? Well, we are now in the process of doing a lot of background technical work on all sorts of things that to do with highways, consulting with the Education Authority, the Environment Agency, all those sort of bodies that can give us the expertise, if you like, regarding these sites, and if they're suitable or if they're not suitable. And also having events like this to explain to people what's happening and where we are at now. Now, this is before we actually produce a draft plan that will identify the sites that we do think are our preferred sites. All we have at the moment are 16, or 17 actually if you count the recent consultation we just started at Denby. We've got 17 potential sites. That doesn't mean in any way that they're all going to be developed, as some people seem to be implying. It's just that we have to, as part of the guidance from central government, look at all potential strategic sites. And that we hope will be late spring, early summer. We can't be any definite than that because there's so much work we've still got to do. And then obviously then there will be a further opportunity for people to comment on those preferred sites. And that will lead on eventually to a plan being submitted to central government with any modifications as necessary. Late 2012, again we can't be definite when that will be, but we're hoping to try and get the strategy adopted as soon as we can, so these are indicative dates. And then there will be an examination of the plan by an independent inspector, and that will take place early 2013. We're aiming for the adoption of the plan mid, or could be late 2013. So that just gives you an overview as to where we are at the moment. Now, we talked about the SLAR, and again, I just want to emphasise that why we have to do it and why we do it the way we do it. Now, government guidance as contained in Planning Policy Statement 3, Housing, requires local development documents to be based upon the findings of strategic housing land availability assessments. That's a clear statement in PPS 3 saying that we have to do them. It has to be part of the evidence base to the core strategy. Having said that, as I said earlier, it's merely a long list of potential housing sites of all sizes, many of which have very little prospect of actually becoming allocated sites. And again, I emphasise it's not a site allocations document, and the inclusion of a site in the SLAR in no implies that any decisions have been made by the council about that site's suitability. The question has been posed to us, why can't sites be removed from the SLAR? Well, I'd refer you to the Communities and Local Government Practice Guide that we have to work to, 2007, which states that the primary role of the Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment is to identify sites with potential for housing, assess the housing potential, and assess if they're likely to be developed. But most importantly, it should aim to identify as many sites with housing potential in and around as many settlements as possible. So that's why we have to include every site that's put to us. And further comments in the practice guide. This is quite important because there is, one of the sites obviously concerned about is in the Greenbelt, and one's in the green field, and there are local plan policies that protect sites like that from development. So what it does say though is, except for more clear-cut designations such as sites of special scientific interest, the scope of the assessment should not be narrowed down by existing policies designed to constrain development, so that the local planning authority is in the best possible position when it comes to decide its strategy for delivering its housing objectives. So that's clearly a statement saying, even if a site's in the Greenbelt, you shouldn't exclude it from the SLAR. What will be the consequences of removing the sites now? As I said earlier, we'll be going out with a preferred sites document later on this year, and that will be the time when we will be removing sites the list of sites that you've seen. And if we were to take them out now, other developers could, mount a legal challenge based on the fact that we're not following the government guidance. And it could even mean that the developer submits a planning application, chances is on, saying, I think this is a pretty good site, which we can't refuse to accept, obviously. And even if it was refused, it could be won on appeal by, an independent inspector could allow it to appeal. Even if that weren't to happen, it would be very difficult for us when we get to the stage of an examination to convince an inspector that all options for housing growth have been thoroughly explored. And that would mean that the core strategy would be found unsound, it would be very expensive for taxpayers, and it could lead to more planning applications being submitted, what we call planning by appeal, and won on appeal with no proper consideration of what the most suitable sites are. Now, another good question, because it would, looking at that map, you would think, well, why are they not considering any brownfield sites at present? Well, a core strategy can only allocate what are called strategic sites. They are sites that are key to developing the core strategy, if you like. Normally, we're talking around about 500 plus houses here. And CLG Planning Policy Statement 12 says that progress on core strategies should not be held up by the inclusion of non-strategic sites. It's not a site allocations document as such. The site allocations document is a separate document that follows on from the core strategy. And so there aren't any vacant brownfield sites of that sort of size available in the borough at the present time. So it doesn't mean that we want to build all on the greenfield and the Greenbelt, and we're not looking at brownfield sites. We're well aware of some of the brownfield sites that are out there that have potential for development, but at this stage we're only looking at the larger sites. And so I will go on to say, however, these brownfield sites that are considered to be suitable will be allocated in the site allocations document that will be produced shortly after the core strategy. We'll actually start working on that much earlier than the adoption of the core strategy, but its actual adoption won't be until after the core strategy. We'll be looking at those sites and estimating how much housing they will provide. Also, we'll be doing a similar exercise with empty properties that we've brought back into use. And we'll subtract that from the total amount of housing that's required in the borough, as determined by a housing requirements study that's currently taking place. I'll explain a bit more about that in a minute. And obviously that will influence how many larger strategic sites we need to allocate. Why don't you consider brownfield sites first? Well, we do. We always consider brownfield sites first. In the past 10 years, 85% of the housing in Amber Valley has been provided on brownfield sites. And actually, it's due to this success that the number of vacant brownfield sites in the borough is now very limited. Those brownfield sites we are aware of, we are looking at, as I said earlier, and the number of houses that these sites can provide up to 2028, which is the end date for the core strategy, will be taken into account when we decide how many strategic sites we actually need to allocate. Why do we need more housing? Well, the regional plan, the East Midlands Regional Plan, is actually still in force, although, as many of you will be aware, the Localism Act is in the process of revoking that. But that doesn't mean that we can just pluck a figure out of the air and say we're not going to, we're going to go for much less than what was in the regional plan. The reason being that we have to base the new figure on evidence. The regional plan, as it stands at present, requires us to provide 510 houses per annum between 2006 and 2026, and that is still what we are working to up until such time as the regional plan is revoked. As I said, it's soon to be revoked. And the latest government, now what are available are the latest government projections, which are actually indicate a figure higher than what's in the regional plan. And there's actually a figure of 584 houses per annum that the the government's projections say we need to be built up to 2028. We feel that we need to look at that because there are assumptions in that. For example, past migration trends that probably don't exist as they did before. So that's why we've commissioned consultants to come up with some more up-to-date figures, which not based, they're based on current migrant trends, for example, and a lot of other factors. This requirement study is ongoing. It's been done for the Derby housing market area as a whole, but I wouldn't be surprised if the figure that does come out of that won't be much different than what was in the regional plan. We don't know, but certainly won't be a lot less. So we have to be realistic about that. And if we weren't to be, we would be very much challenged at the examination as to why we produce the figures we have. So what are the next steps? Well, as I said, there's ongoing a lot of technical work in the background. Transport modelling is one that we're doing. What that is it's not just assessing the traffic impact assessment of a particular site, but a range of sites, and that's quite technical, and to be honest with you, it's something I don't particularly understand that much, but the transport people do. But that's going to take some time. It's going to be the middle of next year until that work has been done. So, that's another important piece of work, and plenty of other work that I mentioned earlier. So that's why we are looking at all the sites, all the implications, and coming to review as to which sites we prefer. And then obviously, as I said, we'll be completing the housing requirements study. Hopefully, March, April time, we should have something to be going on to determine how much housing is required in the borough. And then, as I say, we'll be producing the preferred strategic housing sites for further consultation late spring, early summer. I just wanted to finally just conclude on 3 points. The council, we've always had a policy of allocating brownfield land first. To not do so will be contrary to existing national policy. I emphasise no decisions have been taken as to how much housing is required and what strategic housing sites should come forward as preferred sites. Finally, to take any sites out of consideration until all sites have been properly considered would be in breach of government guidance, and leave the council open to a legal challenge, and it could lead to the core strategy being found unsound.
Could I just add a couple of things to what Rob said? Point one, how remiss of me not to introduce my local development framework member officers. My officers are Rob and Warwick here. There's Alan Cox at the side of me, he's my vice chairman. We've got Chris Short, Chris Emmas Williams, John McCabe, and Councillor Paul Jones, all extremely well. We've all been councillors a long, long time. Thank you. And the other thing was, I did say to you that this would purely be on the petition. This meeting is purely for the petition, and any other sort of questions will actually be not included in our tonight's thoughts. So I do apologise if anybody's arrived to talk about anything else, but we're here to talk about the petition, and that's a lot.
Councillor Hayes, might I just ask you a question?
Of course.
When I arrived, I was discussing with a number of general public over there what they were expecting from this evening. And a number of them seemed to expect a debate of some sort to be taken
There will be a
place
debate.
this evening.
There will be a debate. Basically, at the end, when questions and answers have actually been fulfilled, then we will take questions afterwards from, if anybody wants to ask the board any questions, then...
No, we never agreed that.
Sorry?
We never agreed that. This is the strategy agreed,
Yes.
and please correct me if I'm wrong here, was that we were here to hear their point of view.
Yes.
Question and answers, that's fine, that's dealt with by the officers, who are the experts as far as this field is concerned, whilst we're here to represent the members' point of view. Yeah?
Yeah. That's what we're here for.
But the debate, there was no discussion about the debate, and that point was made specifically by Derek.
Useful just to clarify something.
Yeah.
I think in terms of debate, what I've advised Councillor Hayes and the other members is in terms of the process, which Mr Thornley has been through. Clearly, if there are questions about that, things that you're not sure of, certainly officers, we will try and answer that. It may be that members may feel they want to answer some of the questions, but I take Councillor Short's point, it would be primarily for us to answer those questions. But we're not able, at tonight's meeting, to debate the merits of the sites that you're concerned about, whether they should be identified or not. That will be an exercise which we will be going through, as Mr Thorley said, along with all of the other possible sites. But in terms of the process that we need to follow, we've clearly outlined that for you this evening. If you've got any questions about that, and we want to get into a discussion about the process, as distinct from the merits of the particular sites, I think that's perhaps the distinction we need to draw.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the other final thing I wanted to say to you was with regard to the local press of last week. I don't know anybody read the Ripley and Healing News. With regards to the site down at Cinderhill, that could take a lot of pressure from Amber Valley having to find these sites, because that would be a particularly big site if it comes to fruition. So we could do with some support from all people concerned if it comes to you know, having debates with regards to where sites should be and where they shouldn't be. So taking from the agenda now, we now go on to public speaking, and I will ask John Briggs to start.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I, just before you start the clock, could I just clarify one or two? Are minutes being taken of tonight's meeting?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Sorry? And could I just first of all thank Amber Valley Borough Council for arranging this meeting this evening, following on from the full council meeting on the 18th of January 2012, at which the petition Stage Swanwick was presented, and presentations given by myself, 6 fellow residents and Parish Councillor Peter Staten. And I trust that this evening you will listen carefully to our concerns and give them your full consideration in this extremely important matter for the residents of Swanwick. The petition reads, "We the undersigned call upon Amber Valley Borough Council to withdraw the following sites from the Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment with immediate effect. GA5, the land south of South Street and west of Derby Road, Swanwick, which is Greenbelt land. GA4, which is the land at Lily Street Farm, Derby Road, Swanwick, which is a greenfield site. Swanwick has undergone significant housing development over the years and the population density is over twice the borough average, and we feel the regeneration of brownfield sites should be the priority. And this petition is supported by Swanwick Parish Council." And just to give you some idea of the enormity and size of this petition, this is a petition sheet. It has 25 lines for people to sign on, and currently there are 88 sheets contriving that petition. Currently, over 2,200 residents for whom I speak this evening, who have signed the petition, outnumber the 2,082 who voted in the last local election for all candidates standing in Swanwick in May 2011, and represents over 50% of the population. Out of the 2,342 houses in the village, we have been able to approach so far 1,331, which represents 56%. Of the 1,331, 1,273 signed, representing 96%, and only 4% declined to sign for whatever reason. The residents of Swanwick have been working together with the parish council since August of last year, when a public meeting was called and attended by over 300, following which the parish council confirmed the views expressed by the residents as part of the consultation process. In addition, hundreds of individual letters were written, and during late September, 1,800 signatures were gathered in just over 7 days for this petition. Our local MP was contacted seeking both his support and also reassurance from central government, and indeed he wrote a personal letter to the Chief Executive as a contribution to the consultation. And quoting from part of his letter, potential strategic sites. My view is that the lower end of the range for housing growth should be used, and sites located in or adjoining Derby should be preferred. Clearly, none of the potential sites in the Amber Valley constituency meet this criteria. I would, however, like to stress that in considering all the options, the Council should make every endeavour to protect the Greenbelt. Use of the Greenbelt should be a last resort. Once lost, it cannot be recovered. Keep individual communities distinct. Development that merges towns and or villages should be avoided, and some of the potential sites would cause a great risk of this. Many of our communities have historic separate identities that should be respected. Redevelop brownfield sites. There are various brownfield sites not included in this list of options that could contribute significant numbers of houses without loss of greenfield land. He also spoke in the House of Commons in a debate on the National Planning Policy Framework on the 20th of October, which is on tape and recorded for future posterity. The last thing any of us want is to lose any Greenbelt, which is so valuable to our communities. One thing that is certain is that once it is gone, it is unlikely to ever come back. There is one encouraging remark in the draft framework in paragraph 137. Once established, Greenbelt boundaries should only be altered in exceptional circumstances. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Greenbelt should be changed only where it absolutely has to be. I urge my local council to bear that in mind as it looks at options for future housing development. Before this, on the 14th of September, during Prime Minister's question time, which is also on this tape, the Labour member for Derbyshire North East asked the Prime Minister, what does the Prime Minister think of local authorities encouraging developers putting in planning applications on Greenbelt and Greenfield sites in order to use the new homes bonus to balance their budgets? The reply was, I think people in Derbyshire should make up their own mind through their local council about what planning should take place and where, and that is the agenda this government is going to follow. Following these remarks, a letter was sent to number 10 Downing Street seeking confirmation of this statement, and a copy is available for you and will be circulated to you. And as recently as the 8th of January, once again, the Prime Minister leading from the front. Well, it defeats the object. I mean, we're discussing one thing tonight, Chair. If I can't finish, then the whole row is not going to cut into place. That'll be about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and I said that at the beginning. I mean, it's no use putting these obstacles in front.
Mr. Briggs. Let's not get on to any. Finish your.
I mean, there's one item on the agenda tonight.
I know it is. But
he's asked you to finish your statement.
Carry on.
Stand up.
It's broken in flow, and you lose the impetus as usual. I also have in my possession a personal letter sent from the Minister for Decentralisation and Planning to the Conservative member for Broxtowe, who is also under pressure from her constituents on similar issues, in which it states, furthermore, if the government's draft National Planning Policy Framework were to be adopted as currently drafted, it would provide strong protection to the Greenbelt and encourage land to be allocated of the least environmental or amenity value. Only in exceptional circumstances should Greenbelt boundaries be amended through the development plan process, and only after robust public consultation and independent examination of the draft proposal. We intend to publish the final version of the framework before the 31st of March. Following involvement from the National Trust, the CPRE, the Daily Telegraph's campaign Hands Off Our Land, and thousands of members of the public during the consultation of the NPPF, there could well be significant amendments in this final version. Sources in the Communities Department suggest that the revised document will address concerns that did not define sufficiently the word sustainable. The new version will more clearly say that the government uses the Brundtland definition under which sustainable development meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And on the last few paragraphs. The revised NPPF will also be clearer in suggesting that brownfield land should be the priority for developers rather than greenfield. In the previous version, it used the more vague phrase of land of least environmental value. The Department of Communities and Local Government Committee, comprising of cross-party MPs, also issued a report before Christmas urging ministers to rewrite the document and remove the default answer of yes to almost all development. The essential characteristics of Greenbelt land is their permanence and their protection must be maintained as far as can be seen ahead and should be altered only in exceptional circumstances. There are 5 purposes of including land in Greenbelt which are all particularly significant. 1. To check the unrestricted sprawl of larger built-up areas. 2. To protect the neighbouring towns from merging into one another. 3. To assist in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment. 4. To preserve the setting of towns and villages. And 5. To assist in urban regeneration, encouraging the recycling of derelict and other urban land, i.e. brownfield sites. I, like many residents here tonight, don't just live in Swanwick, but something much more important. It is our home. I've lived there for 40 years. We genuinely care about our village and what happens to it both now and in the future. And it is therefore incumbent on all of us, we the general public and you, our elected representatives, to leave a legacy for future generations. Finally, since the middle of 2011, there has been many words and much rhetoric spoken on localism and the NPPF, especially from the leader and ministers of our country. We, the public, now need to see these words put into action and decisions made to reflect those remarks made at the highest level of government, and indeed that Amber Valley are leading the way in delivering this at a local level. Thank you for allowing me to finish, Chair.
Thank you. Can I suggest that the rest of the speakers will have 3 minutes and 3 minutes only?
Well, could I just raise a point of that, Chair, if I may? I think originally on the list was something like 20 odd speakers that were invited to speak tonight. That list has been pared down purposely to assist councillors in being that we're not repeating ourselves. So I think we're only about 7 or 8 speakers altogether. Is that all right?
7. There are 8 speakers.
So there's 8 speakers. So we've actually cut the number down from 20 at 3 minutes down to about 7 or 8. So I would ask you to just be a little bit generous instead of on the time clock of 3 minutes. And I'm not suggesting that we're allowed to ramble on. I'm not suggesting that for a minute. I think, you know, if we've made the point, we make the point. But
well, I will allow.
Thank you.
To divide our points so that we're not saying the same thing over and over again.
Okay.
Next speaker, John Payne.
Good evening. I'll be very brief. Actually, this is specifically about the Derby Road GA5 site, and it's about the technical aspects of it. It's to do with encroachment around the sewage works. I think we all know the sewage works are located in this area, and what the council's policy is with encroachment and what the safety boundaries are for development around sewage works. There's also the well-known facts of geological faults on this site. We have maps from the coal board concerning 2 known faults and 1 possible fault. And a house, you know, fell down on Derby Road some years ago, and has never been allowed to be redeveloped, that site, because of the well-known fault. This also caused a problem in the school playing field a couple of years ago. The other thing is the technical aspects regarding all the services under the site, that all the existing sewers run into the sewage works, and there's a high pressure gas main runs across the middle of the site as well. So there's also a flooding problem with the bottom end of the site. I don't know if you're aware of that, but we have photographs here of when it's all underwater. Yeah. So you know, this may come in the questions and answers later on.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Peter Staten.
Thank you, Councillor. That's very brief. I've said a lot of this before, but I've tried to pare it down.
Yeah, sure.
The residents of Swanwick and Swanwick Parish Council are deeply unhappy about the proposed housing developments being presented at this time. The arrival of 500 new houses in Derby Road South and a further 500 in Lily Street area on Derby Road North is bound to have a great impact on the local infrastructure, particularly on water supply and the control of sewage. In fact, parts of this area have a history of problems. 1,000 new houses suggest an increase of a possible 2,000 extra vehicles to be introduced onto our roads, with the ensuing congestion. Parking in Swanwick is already an escalating problem and is unlikely to improve with the addition of 2,000 cars in the village, as our sole car park holds 50. The Swanwick Primary School is already under great pressure and is unable to take on new pupils, so the very large increase in the population will bring an impossible situation to these children's education. No doubt this result will also be felt at Swanwick Hall School. If we are to be forced again to save these fields, this time is a far stronger threat than ever. The people of Swanwick and Swanwick Parish Council will not flinch from the fight. The petition handed to Amber Valley Council, as Mr. Briggs has presented, represents almost 50% of the residents in this village. The Parish Council will not hesitate to finance a defence, if necessary, as yet another public inquiry. Over the years I have attended 3 such inquiries, and 3 different inspectors have found for the council and the residents on every occasion. All this brings its cost, and it is public money that is spent. Please also note that the development being considered is against the existing town plan and should not be administered until a new plan is created. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next speaker, Dennis Fetwood.
Thank you. The Parish Council was elected in 2011 with a clear mandate to protect the Greenbelt and greenfield sites surrounding Swanwick. The mandate also included an obligation to prevent urban sprawl which would damage the identity of the community from that of the surrounding towns of Ripley and Alfreton. Already Swanwick's been linked more or less without break between Swanwick and Leabrooks, and also without break between Swanwick and Summercotes. There's only 2 areas left, and that's the links between Alfreton and Ripley. Fortunately, there's a reservoir on one of them, which may just prevent some housing. But the mandate from the electorate has been clearly and unambiguously reinforced by the huge petition against the proposed development in these areas and the erosion of our green fields. The position of this parish council follows that of previous parish councils over many years, and you have already heard of the various appeals that Councillor Peter State has been involved in. 3 successful inquiries from a parish council perspective have been won. And we intend to continue to defend that position and that of the parish on this issue, and if necessary resort to formal determination as we have in the past. This stance is wholly in line with the principle of the Localism Act and determination of such matters at community level. And I hope that these views are shared by elected representatives on Amber Valley Borough Council. In drawing up a core strategy, Amber Valley Borough Council should take into account the wishes and implications of neighbourhood plans or local plans of its parishes and towns. Plans which many third-tier councils, including Swanwick, are in the process of developing. It would be remiss of the Borough Council to finalise its core strategy whilst these plans are being formulated, and it could be argued that you should be providing substantial support to us to bring these to an early conclusion. Whilst we recognise the need for some housing growth, but not to the extent presented, all our efforts, that includes government, county, borough, etc., should be focused on the retention of our unique heritage by a core strategy that has a focus on long-term sustainable redevelopment rather than the short-term interests of developers and landowners who have little or no interest in sites that appear uneconomic or non-viable. Without a strategy of this nature, all that will happen is the development of modern greenfield sites on the periphery of communities with an ever-increasing donut effect on the inside, where the centre becomes a vacuum of poor housing, empty shops, Victorian streets choked with traffic, and the slow strangulation of what once would have been viable and vibrant communities in the past. It is clear that compelling arguments have been presented by the petition sponsors against the proposed developments at sites GA4 and GA5, and as a result, Swanwick Parish Council formally request that Amber Valley Borough Council withdraw these areas from the proposals without delay. I draw your attention to a document issued by the Communities and Local Government which talks about an introduction to neighbourhood planning. Neighbourhood planning is a new way for communities to decide the future of the places where they live and work. They will be able to choose where they want new homes, shops and offices to be built, have their say on what these buildings should look like, and grant planning permission for the new buildings they want to see go ahead. In theory, planning is always supposed to give local communities a say in decisions that affect them. But in practice, communities have often found it hard to have a say. The government wants to put the power back into the hands of local residents, businesses and councils and civic leaders. And I'll draw one thing to your attention. If you think about Swanwick and all the housing that's gone off in Swanwick over the last 50 years, it's been huge, it's been massive. But what have we got? We have no centre, we have about 3 or 4 shops scattered in the middle. There's no parade of shops, there's hardly any community facilities, and yet with all the growth of housing that Swanwick has undertaken over the past, whether it's Broadway, whether it's the Minter Estate, whether it's Lark Hill, no facilities were provided other than houses. There were no parks provided, no schooling provided. It's been a shambles, quite frankly, and what we don't want to see is a continuation of that, with 1,000 houses put on green fields and no attention spent to the centre of Swanwick. This same document says the local planning authority will be obliged by law to help people draw up their neighbourhood plans. But to date we've had quite a poor response to our request for help with this from the borough, and I implore you today to think about that. The government has committed to provide £50 million up till March 2015 to help support local parish councils and town councils in making neighbourhood planning a success. And we want to work with Amber Valley Council to make sure that we get a proper plan that actually means something to Swanwick and is not just filling a vacuum of what supposed to be a massive housing need. Thank you very much.
Some of the points that you've made, Derek will actually sort of respond to.
Yes, thank you.
Once the speakers have concluded. Okay. The next speaker is Mike Vagan.
Good evening. I'm not going to bore everybody and just regurgitate my 3-minute speech from January. I just want to pick up on some of the salient points. I just want to start off by quoting from the...
Stand up, you can be here.
Oh, right, sorry. I just want to start by just running through some of the fundamentals of the draft national policy. It goes on to say the fundamental aim of Greenbelt is to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open. The essential characteristics of Greenbelt are their openness and their permanence. And there's 5 reasons why we've got Greenbelt. To check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas, to prevent neighbouring towns from merging, to assist in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment, to preserve the setting and special character of historic towns, and to assist in urban regeneration by encouraging the recycling of derelict land. I'd just like to talk a few more points about the numbers that I've received from Rob Thorley from last summer. In his presentation just a few minutes ago, Rob was saying that the regional plan target that's currently still live, that's going to effectively be overtaken by the localism bill probably sometime later this year. He says the numbers is probably going to be broadly similar to what it is now. and the current numbers is about 10,200 houses, of which there's about 5,000 houses already in the plan. So effectively we're going to need about 5,000 or 6,000 houses until 2026.
Yes.
So Rob's also confirmed in the meeting in August and in an email to me later on that the 16 strategic sites, not including the Cylinder Hill, could give a maximum of 25,000 houses.
Yeah.
So we need 5,000 new houses and we have 25,000 houses. So that's roughly about 20% of the total potential.
Yeah.
So I don't quite see how the numbers are quite adding up, because we only need 20%, whereas only 8 of the 16 strategic sites are actually Greenbelt. So I just simply don't understand where those numbers are coming from, based on the simple fact that Greenbelt, as has been said by the Prime Minister, by lots of cabinet people, by all over the press, etc., that the Greenbelt is always the last resort. So I don't quite see how the numbers are adding up. I appreciate that Rob's gone on to the presentation and said we're obliged to put them on by law, but I guess that from the simple point of view that the Greenbelt is always the last resort, the minute you come up with your plan sometime later this year, that automatically the 8 Greenbelt pieces of land will automatically be taken off, because the Greenbelt is always the last resort, as we've already been told by the Prime Minister and everybody else. I just want to go on to ask 2 more questions. The first one is, you said that we've got option 3, which is the regional plan target, and you said that once the localism bill kicks in, the plan will roughly be similar. It might be slightly different. So I don't quite understand how, John picked up on it in the letter from the local MP, where Nigel Mills has said he's recommending that Amber Valley go with balanced migration, because the numbers are significantly different, because with balanced migration, the numbers that Amber Valley already have would actually cover the shortfall in houses. So if we listen to the local MP, we actually wouldn't need any 16 strategic sites, because the numbers are already in the plan. So I don't understand the discrepancy between the local MP, who's a member of the government, and this council, which is also run by the Conservatives. Something's not quite adding up here. And the final point is, based in February's planning meeting, and this one caught me out because it was quite specific. It was the development at 120 Breach Road in Heanor that was discussed in February's planning meeting. And bear in mind, this is only for 14 houses. It was actually turned down, and in the appeal, it also talked about the fact that the application was refused on the grounds of being contrary to safe policies H5, EN1, EN2, EN8, in relation to being outside the frameway and inappropriate development within the Greenbelt. And the last paragraph says, the inspector concluded that whilst the lack of a 5-year supply of deliverable housing land offers some positive benefits, this can only be given minimal weight, and the considerations do not, either on their own or in combination, clearly outweigh the harm done to the Greenbelt. And that's 14 houses. And for the Greenbelt lands that we're talking about, for the 8 areas in the strategic plan, we're talking about 500 plus. So 14 got rejected because it was in the Greenbelt, and we're talking about 500 houses in 8. The numbers don't add up. I'd love to hear an answer later on.
You won't get an answer later on.
Oh, I thought we were going to have a Q&A.
We are after. The next speaker is Mark Hogg.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes and the panel for giving us this arena to have our say again.
Thank you.
I mean, last time, further to my presentation I made on the 18th of January at the full council meeting, when I told you about sustainable development and brownfield regeneration, and as Mr Briggs has said, I feel it cannot be repeated enough that I now understand the National Planning Policy Framework will use the Brundtland report. That was a report delivered to the United Nations in 1987 and is the standard version of sustainable development. And sustainable development is development that meets the needs of present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Therefore, we can't reuse a depleting resource like greenfield sites. With this in mind, we return to the issue of brownfield regeneration. This is also addressed in the forthcoming National Planning Policy Framework. And as John said, the revised wording makes it clearer the suggestion that brownfield land should be the priority for developers, rather than the vague phrase of land of least environmental value. Currently in Amber Valley, there are 556 commercial and domestic properties registered for council tax exemption. This is a calculated loss of revenue of over £6.5 million per annum to the council. If we look at just one site, the Butley Engineering Works, the loss of revenue to the council is £70,000 a year. Yet, when this site is redeveloped with 140 plus dwellings, this could create an income in excess of £250,000 based on a Band E property. Plus, when you calculate in the new homes bonus from the government, that £70,000 shortfall becomes a £500,000 positive cash flow coming in every year. And this can be replicated many times on the list. In the Local Development Framework newsletter, you have identified 20 hectares of employment land that does not currently have planning permission, that could be reclassified. But yet you have only allocated housing at 30 units per hectare, whilst the last two developments in Swanwick was 41 units and 47 units. Surely the low density figure of 30 units is driven more by developers who have greater profits in larger plot sizes. Earlier, Rob Thorley, your officer, quoted from the Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment Practice Guide. And in that same paragraph that he was quoting, it also states particular types of lands or areas may be excluded from the assessment. Where this is the case, reasons for doing so have to be justified. Fair enough. But it also says it may be useful to map excluded areas and ascribe a nil housing potential to them. The same paragraph that Rob was reading earlier. Again, I urge Amber Valley to make brownfield regeneration the top priority and to keep the percentage of new dwellings built on brownfield sites at its current 90%. And that would leave Amber Valley in a good place to live and a cleaner future. And that's all I need to say.
Thank you, Mark.
Sorry, Mark.
Next speaker, Matt Spencer.
Thank you very much. I don't have a lot to say because I'm a recent arrival and I haven't got a lot of facts and figures to present to you guys. These people here, they've done a hell of a lot of work and I support them. And I just want to say that the strength of feeling in the local area, supporting these people with the effort they're putting into the campaigns, I find incredibly inspiring. I arrived in the Swanwick area 4 months ago. I knew about a lot of the plans of the Shah list well before I came here, and I actually thought Amber Valley Borough Council, they actually do this. And I can't believe what I've seen. And I used the phrase at the Have You Say event a few weeks ago, it feels like you're smashing the place up. That's strong words, that is, I know it is. But let me give you why I said that, the reasons why. We've got the Morrison store potentially going up there, or is going, been approved now. The town centre is going to be decimated. That's smashing the place up. We're doing it with the incinerator, the other side of Swanwick. That's smashing the whole area up, the greenfield, the Greenbelt land. And these proposals we're talking about tonight, 500 houses on each side, 2 sites. It's just going to completely destroy the characterisation of the whole area. And I go to Peter Statham's presentation tonight, and he talks about the localism bill. I'm absolutely fantastically applauding that, because I think localism should be about the local people driving a lot of the things that we consider to be important. And the final point I want to make, only a few minutes for my discussion here, but the final point I want to make is what I've seen in the 4 months from this council representing the people is nil. I really feel that. That gives me the strength of feeling on that. I don't believe you represent the feelings of the people from the community. And I'm not just talking about Swanwick, I'm talking about the whole of Canberra Valley for the Borough Council area. The 16 sites, the incinerator, the Morrisons, what the hell are you guys doing? Why aren't you representing the people that actually live here? That's all I want to say. I want to just thank all my colleagues along here. You put a lot of effort, you put a lot of words together. That was just my feelings for the last 4 months. I'm sure the next year or so there'll be a lot more food from these people here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Final speaker, Howard Hall.
Yeah. Right, yeah, thank you. I'd just like to give you something to read as well. There's a couple of copies yourselves on the panel here. The councillors here, just like to show. There's a lot of facts and figures on there. But, you know, basically that, thanks for giving us this opportunity, and I feel sort of quite encouraged by what I saw from Rob's presentation there about what you are actually thinking, but more about that later. But you know, I go along with everybody else about this, you know, ultimate protection of greenfield sites, and I think the area. I speak really about the area behind Derby Road because we speak glibly about greenfield sites, but this is a site particularly rich in wildlife. Rob, as part of his presentation, mentioned something like, we've still got to consider Greenbelt and not be restricted by that. You know, you were talking about sites of special scientific interest. And I do believe that, you know, if there was a campaign, you could even make those fields, you know, such an area. You probably heard what I said last time, okay, but I'm really interested in wildlife, and just some brief things here. My garden at the moment, we feed the birds, but we've now seen 65 different species of birds. There's only 220 birds you'll see in the entire country, and we've seen, you know, a huge percentage in our garden. They won't come if the fields were sort of totally built on. But what's more important is birds are classified according to, you know, whether the populations are declining or increasing. And there's a red list. These are birds that are the populations are dramatically falling. And it's almost as if the birds are on our side, because when I spoke last time, there were 14 birds on the red list that I'd seen on those fields or in the garden. And then about 2 weeks ago, a new one appeared. So there's now 50, a lesser redpoll, 4 in our garden. Now these are birds that are nationally decreasing in numbers, and we've got populations of these on those fields. There are 28 birds which are on the amber list. These are ones not critically endangered, but still going through a bad time. And if you look at them, you'll recognise a lot of these birds. You know, swallow. You know, how much are our lives enriched every spring? You know, when we see a first swallow. House martins as well. Swanwick at the moment is a thriving nesting site for house martins. They wouldn't be there if they couldn't sort of like hawk over the fields for the insects that are over those green belt. We've got plenty of birds of prey. There's a kestrel hovering over my garden today. Didn't take any of the rats that are still there, but it just gives you an example. It's that every day there's something to sort of cherish. But, you know, I've seen buzzards, I've seen tawny owl, I've seen little owl over there, as well as kestrel. We get sparrowhawks regularly into the garden. In winter, we get winter migrants, redwings and field furs. They're always on those fields. The horses, you know, with the horse manure that's produced there, you know, creates insects. They go after those insects, sort of thing. In spring, those hedgerows, and thank God they still exist. You know, you get warbs in there. Some of those are, you know, critically endangered. I haven't heard of cuckoo for the last 3 years, but I've heard cuckoos on the back fields. You know. Amazingly rare bird now. Speaking to a real expert in the area, Buckley Res, you know, has now recorded over 150 bird species. That's over half the birds you'll see in this country, and it's a recognised migration route taken in Buckley Res over those green fields. You know, you can see I'm interested in birds mainly, but rooks are another family that I decline. We've got a rookery opposite us, and you probably know there's a rookery by Lily Street site as well. You know, if you've driven through Swanwick up to Afton Roundabout, you'll see all those rooks and jackdaws, etc. But also, you know, there's you know, a host of like mammals there as well, and it's there on the list: badger, fox, rabbit, stoat, weasel, grey squirrel, shrew, vole, mice, and I forgot last time, but you know, there's a couple of types of bat, one of them which is rare, a whiskered bat, that's been seen as well. In winter, you probably know, the res freezes over. Where do the birds go? Well, they go to the stream that flows at the bottom of our gardens, you know. I've seen woodcock, snipe, kingfisher, herons, of course, you know. What I'm trying to say, it's a really rich area, and it's probably richer than you guys even know about, you know. And please, take it seriously, don't build on it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the speaking. Can I get Derek to come back on one or two points that you've made?
Yeah, just 2 or 3 points, I think, just I wanted to just clarify, I think, Mr. Frankwell, you talked about neighbourhood planning, and I think you articulated, you know, obviously the concerns of the parish council in terms of you wanting to get very much involved in this. I was a little bit surprised to hear that we haven't given you a positive response. Do you know who's contacted us and what's come back?
I'm not sure whether it was actually Rob or yourself, actually, I thought.
Right.
I think it was sort of a bit of advice, and at the last meeting of the full council, if you remember, I think it was one of the councillors suggested that we should be going slow, don't rush into these things, but that's not really the case, is it? You know, you shouldn't really be, I don't think, should be producing a core strategy without getting the views of the towns and parishes that make up Portland and Valley. I think it would be remiss of you not to actually take those into account.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Now, in terms of our stance on neighbourhood planning, I took a report to the last council, it was actually the 18th of January meeting, which was doing 2 things. Firstly, responding to the government's consultation on neighbourhood planning, because the government is still drawing up regulations for how it would work. So officially, it's sort of not it, but I know yourselves and a number of parish town councils in the borough are wanting to start to look at this, you know, already, which is good. And so it's partly to respond to that consultation, but also partly to establish a clear position in terms of the borough council's capacity to support people like yourselves in actually preparing your own neighbourhood plan. And that report set out where we felt we could offer that support in terms of information and advice that we hold, directing you to where you can hold information to help you that we don't hold. And also to be able to support a bit further down the line as neighbourhood plans become developed in terms of, if necessary, to come and attend meetings on a sort of an occasional basis if you feel you need that level of support. So that was really designed to try and give a positive response to that.
I think that's been very bit negative. I recall that response. I think it's been felt a bit negative. You're actually directing us to areas for support, but we are lay people. We haven't got officers like the Borough Council. For example, Leicestershire County Council have provided funding for the provision of some local neighbourhood plans, and you know, we're looking to the Borough Council to actually help.
What I wanted to particularly clarify about neighbourhood planning, and there's been a lot of talk about neighbourhood planning and localism. I think what yourselves and indeed everybody across the borough who's embarking on this process needs to be very clear about is that the neighbourhood plan is an opportunity for people to look at, obviously, the issues in their own area, but there is a very strong emphasis in the legislation and in the regulations that will be coming out about growth.
Yes.
And neighbourhood plans are not about, as some people out there perceive them to be, a means of stopping development per se. I think it's very important that everybody understands that a neighbourhood plan has to be consistent with the Borough Council's policies, i.e. the core strategy and other documents, which means we need to work together as we take it forward.
I think that's the point. Exactly, I agree exactly with what you're saying.
So I just wanted to be absolutely clear that
yes.
you understood that. Mr Payne, I think, made some points, some technical questions, which, you know, I think, as Rob outlined in his presentation, there are a lot of technical issues surrounding a lot of these sites, which we don't know the answers to. There's a lot more work to be done. There are, on the face of it, quite a lot of physical constraints and infrastructure constraints to development of a lot of these sites, and we clearly need to understand whether those constraints are fundamental constraints, which means that there's no prospect of them being overcome, or whether there are mechanisms to do that as part of our work in looking at the whole range of sites. So that, you know, they are legitimate questions, but at this moment in time we're not yet in possession of all the information to be able to answer those. So that is work to be done. Mr. Bagan talked about this apparent difference between the 5,000 and the 25,000. I think I just want to try and emphasise this very clearly. You're quite right, when you look at all of those sites on there, and if we add in this additional consultation we've just embarked on at Denby, there are clearly, if we were to develop all those, which there's no prospect that that would happen at all, that would deliver potentially somewhere in the region of 25,000 homes. So you're absolutely right about that. You're also right to say that the Greenbelt policy is very clear nationally, and this council has consistently followed that national policy, and I think that appeal decision you quoted is a good example of where we've followed our own policies, which again are in line with the national policy. Unfortunately, in that particular case, the appeal decision backed our decision to refuse planning. So yes, Greenbelt will be very much, you know, at the end of the process, but until we've looked at all of these possible sites in terms of the reasons why these sites may not be suitable for technical, environmental or indeed other reasons, we cannot simply rule out sites because they're in the Greenbelt. It may be, and I'm not saying this is definitely the case, if we go and look at all the sites that are not in the Greenbelt and for whatever reason find that they're all totally incapable of coming forward, we may have to consider going to the Greenbelt, but that is very much at the end of the process. So I think the principle that you highlighted is absolutely right, but at this stage we just don't know enough about the issues that will determine whether the sites are suitable technically or environmentally or otherwise to be able to say, yes, we can now say these sites are contenders and these sites we can categorically rule out. If we knew that, then we'd be in a position to make some decisions. We expect to be in that position around the middle of this year when we will be presenting a report as officers to members. It will go via this group initially before coming back to full council. And that will set out comprehensively our assessment of these options and will recommend to members some choices that they will have to consider whether they want to go with those. Whilst at the same time, a number of speakers have picked up on this, been quite clear about what we believe can come forward in terms of development on brownfield sites, a realistic provision in terms of bringing empty homes back into use. You will hopefully see at that stage how we've got to that process, but we're not in the position, because we don't have all the information before us, to be able to make those decisions now. That's all I want to say at this stage. Obviously, answer any other questions.
Can I say, has any...
Could I raise a question regarding Derby Road South and the
Yes.
potential there? Only 20 years ago there was an application put in for 65 units and it was turned down on the grounds that the village couldn't accommodate the extra traffic. And over the last 50 years I've been brought up in the village, and I know the Councillor McCabe went to school, and we've seen a dramatic increase, 2/3 Swanwick's increased, and there's been very little new infrastructure. So if it was turned down 20 years ago for 65 units and we've had no new infrastructure, how can you consider 500?
We have tried to explain, I think, that these sites are strategic sites, and we've got to include strategic sites in our vision, if you like.
Yeah.
And then they will be struck out if not suitable.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that it was planning application was put in 20 years ago for 65 on that site, and it was turned down.
Can I just, on this one? We are not determining planning applications here.
Pardon?
We're not determining a planning application. Yeah. All we're doing is that landowners have said, will you look at our site for future development? Having said that, we have got to look at it. As Rob explained earlier, if we don't, they can take us to court on a legal, judicial review of what we're doing. So we've got to put it in to look at it. That doesn't mean to say it's going to get built on. And I think that has got to come across very clear tonight. Just because it's on that map doesn't mean to say it's going to be on the next map, and it doesn't mean to say it's going to be built on. So please listen to what we're trying to say. We've got to put these areas in because we've been asked to. To not put them in or to take them out at this stage would lead us into trouble with the government policy. We've got to look at them. That doesn't mean to say we're going to build on them. And I think infrastructure is going to be one of the technical issues that officers will be looking at when they come to us with their recommendations later on this year. I'm sure that infrastructure is going to be one of those. So I take your point, sir, but we're not looking at plan application at this stage.
Just very quickly to add to what Councillor Cox has said there, infrastructure is absolutely a critical issue. And something we have to produce alongside the core strategy is something called an infrastructure delivery plan. And that's basically saying whatever sites you choose, or whatever development plans you have in place, you can't just stick a load of sites on a map and hope they happen. You have to show that there's actually the mechanisms in place to deliver the very things that, quite rightly, Swanwick residents have said wasn't there in an earlier generation. And I think, you know, that's not just unique to Amber Valley. I think the sort of past generation of members and officers, for whatever reason, didn't have the mechanisms in place to deliver all the infrastructure, physical, social, etc., that needs to go with new housing. And if we're not showing how we can deliver that, or how that can be delivered, then we will fall down on exactly the points that Councillor Cox has said. So that's an absolutely fundamental part of the plan.
Peter.
Well, I'm trying to be helpful here. There's a site in Alfreton town, Cressy Fields, now empty. I know it's not colossal, but it's quite substantial. And it would help if you use that building. That site actually belonged to the NHS, I understand. That's our money. It's gone. Isn't it time we do something about it? We've also got the, this is very small, I agree, the old tax building. I understand it's gone up for sale now. But there's a block of flats there. And it just lies, it's laid there for 10 years empty.
Chairman, can I just ask that we stick to the matter we're discussing this evening? If we want to go off on other planning areas,
I appreciate what you're saying, Chris. Yes.
well, can we stick to that?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Can I speak?
Yes, you can.
Thank you, Steve. Just to give some balance to this, we're talking about 2 sites this evening. Is anybody here promoting those sites? It's not a secret meeting
The people
this evening, but nobody bothered to come forward to put the case for them.
I mean,
It was just an observation.
We're not debating We're looking at your petition. That's all we're looking at. We're not making any debate.
One of the questions I've got, actually, I think Councillor Cox has now answered it. And my question was, who's identified these sites? And I think you've answered the question, right? It's developers that's put this forward in every case. Is that
developers and owners?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. My concern, really in the long term, is what do we do with, you know, shall we say, poor housing stock in the middle of some of our towns and villages? There's no proposals to, say, wipe out, you know, parts of Riddings or parts of Leabrooks or parts of etc. There's really poor housing and really, what's the word, into a visionary plan would be looking at replacing some of that. I mean, Swanwick, its centre is dire, really. And we're looking at green fields again. And not just talking about Swanwick, but, you know, I appreciate what we're trying to get to, but you've got some difficult decisions to make. You've all got to get this kind of representation from every area, aren't you?
Yes.
It might not be as forceful as ours.
You can assure that we will get significant representation, certainly at the inspection, when that comes in there, significant representation from developers.
You will, yeah.
And they will be here with their barristers and everybody.
Yeah, and so will we.
So will we.
Yeah, so I say...
So we've got...
You know, you've been elected, Councillor Cox, same as we have. Yep. You know, that defeats some proposals by developers. At the end of the day, look at Greece, it's the public that, you know, have this way, really.
But anyway, can we stick to the petition, please?
Yeah, well, I'm doing, yeah. There's no sites on there that talk about redevelopment.
If I could make a comment, and I think most of the other people are doing as well. It'd be interesting if part of the working group could contribute as well, rather than making points on standing orders and get involved in what we're here for tonight. But I'd like to ask a question, really, that is based on what Rob addressed earlier, and I thank you for his presentation. And this is a long question, so please don't cut me short. Derby Housing Market Area Strategic Housing Availability Assessment identifies sources of sites to be included in the document, and the government requires that all local authorities carry out assessments which have the potential to provide new housing, and if and when they are likely to be developed, and how many dwellings could potentially be built on them. We agreed on that. One of the sources is sites which have been promoted as suitable for housing to be built on, then by landowners, agents and developers, which certainly the two sites in Swanwick have been, especially GA5, albeit on Greenbelt land. With a local development plan currently in place, and now an emerging core strategy being formulated to take over from that, why does the local authority not have the courage of its own convictions when, for example, a promoted site is put forward on Greenbelt land to develop 500 houses and reject it right at the very beginning, based on the fact that the land is not, I repeat, not available for development? It appears that having a local development plan in place which defines and categorises land within Amber Valley appears to be superfluous if this is allowed to happen when landowners, agents and developers put their sites forward.
Did you not listen to Robert?
Chairman, it doesn't deserve an answer.
Seriously?
I think
Robert did actually, Robert did actually say.
That's a valid question.
But Robert answered it with his presentation.
No, he hasn't.
No, he hasn't.
He said we can't throw it out.
We cannot,
well, why have you got a
cannot
can
throw it out.
Can I ask why you have a local development plan now?
We can't throw it out at this stage. It's the next stage when we reject the sites off there. That was what Robert said earlier on.
But surely, I mean, I'm a taxpayer. You are using our money to go along lines which you're saying will probably, you will do at the end of the day based on what I said.
No, I didn't say
why,
that at all.
No, I know.
I use the word probably at all.
But why are we wasting our money going along that line?
Because that's the law. And if we were to throw it out now, I'm sorry, but if we were to throw it out now, it would waste.
It's not a question.
Let me finish. If we were to throw it out now, it would waste a lot more taxpayers' money because we'd have a judicial review, and that would cost us 25 grand in legal fees alone.
No, because why have you got a local development plan now which categorises and defines land?
Because this is overtaking it. It's the next stage.
Steve, this is becoming a debate again.
Well, here we are. We've got councillors here who are part of a working group who are bringing up standing orders instead of contributing to why we're here tonight. And I find it unbelievable.
Nobody's mentioned standing orders except you.
Why can't we have a debate?
Because we're not here to
If
debate.
you won't mind then,
Right, can we pour answer and no, ask to speak?
That's the message question.
Can I just say something? I don't think there's any need at all to have a debate tonight, or any, because Councillor Cox just answered it, because what he said was the developers would be coming along with the barristers and their money, and to me, that's the answer from the council.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not going to
Money. You're not here for the
We
public.
are listening.
You're not here for the public.
We have listened to you. We're not making a decision tonight.
Accept that. We accept your obligation.
And as if which people would accept it. Thank you for
my
accepting it.
slide. I've just put it up to remind you what I did say earlier on.
Yeah. Can I ask a question?
You can.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr.
And it's a follow-up to what John said, really, because thank you, Rob. You've answered a lot of my questions, really, there. Yeah. But what I don't understand is how we only got to know about this Schlar sort of thing, I think back last August. And am I right in thinking that the council had gone out to potential owners, potential sites about 2008? Yes. Is that about right? Yeah. Well, I've got what I'd like an answer to really is how did the people who own the land know you were looking for sites? And were there loads of people out there who perhaps have got land they were desperate to get shut up but didn't know about it, which would have been more suitable, perhaps sites for housing? I don't know the answer to the question, you see. So.
If I could answer that. When we come up with slides for the SLAR, we do what's called a call for sites. So we ask the developers out there, landowners, if they've got any sites they want us to consider.
Yeah.
We also look at other sites that we become aware of, or we ourselves are aware of, and on the sites that we've looked at in previous plans, and looked at them again, and where, you know, and they are also in the SLAR, so there's a mixture really. It's really any potential housing site. But I can't emphasise it enough, it's just a list of sites in the database.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
It doesn't mean in any way, shape or form that the council...
Yeah, but what have you... I'm pleased you've now got another site in your books, this Cinder Hill site, is it something like that? That looks, well, I can't speak for Danby residents, but we'll move forward. But are you currently looking at what, I don't know why that person didn't sort of put their site forward, because that'd be a fantastic site.
Oh yes, no.
It's expensive.
If we...
Well, no, come on, I mean, I don't know if that's true or not.
No, if a developer puts a site in and there's a site next to it that we think, well, that's maybe a possibility, but it would not make sense to not develop that site as well, we will actively try and find out who owns that land to see if they're interested in doing a more comprehensive scheme.
So on a particular site, and I think you already mentioned that, the Butterley Works, is that a site you're looking at as well to try and develop it?
Yeah, it's certainly,
It's a brownfield site.
That's brownfield, so it's in this.
But it's not expected to be anywhere near potentially the scale of development.
Yeah, I understand that.
That's something that we've been in discussion with.
Mark's point as well about, you know, the fact that we don't need 25,000 houses.
No, we don't. Nowhere near.
Yeah,
Absolutely
then
not. We don't need anywhere near that.
Surely that's the way to go. If Butterley Works, what will it put, 200 houses?
No, I don't know.
But surely should be looking to sort of like widen the
well,
circle.
as I explained earlier, we are, but we're here, we're only talking about bigger sites than that. It doesn't mean that we're ignoring the brownfield sites, we're looking at those and we're taking them into account. When we've come to a figure that we think is, we can defend to examination in terms of the overall housing requirements for Amber Valley, we will first of all say what's already, because the plan will run from 2008 to 2028, so first of all what's already got planning permission, what's been built, what's already allocated in the local plan that we think should stay allocated in the local plan, what empty properties do we still go forward, what brownfield land, which is not of a strategic scale but still important, you know, still is potentially developable, we take all of that off the housing requirement for the borough, and then we're left with what needs to be provided on these larger strategic sites.
What should we less than 5,000?
I think we appreciate that better explanation now, because, you know, from a layperson, it's just seeing these sites, all greenfield sites. That's the concern. Everybody in the country, I think, is really up against greenfield sites, and you're going to, you know, you're just the same. I mean, interesting that. Look at this picture here, and it says, "What shall we do with this piece of land along here?" Leave it alone. Look at it. It's fantastic. It's Amber Valley.
Yeah.
John.
I just wanted an opinion from you, anonymous batting for you. I can tell you I will be batting for it, because I don't think any greenfield site at all should be built on in Amber Valley. And the reason why is India and China are now buying up land in Africa, which is agricultural land. They have got more money to buy. It's the future. Probably not in our generation. I'm looking around the room, might be on one or two of you. Well, yeah, go on then. Any bit of agricultural land is going to be the most very, very important.
Yeah.
We're going to need it. Might need to build cars on it. Might need to put taters on it. But you know, I've said, and I've asked it. You know, made my views very clear, and I'm making my views right through this strategy meeting. You know, we need
they're the same groups. They are the same opinions as the rest of the group. We're all in favour of staying off greenfield land as if it's at all possible.
So, don't say it's a last resort, though. We might have to use it if you can't get these houses.
The point I'm making, I mean, there were points made earlier on about this group, and once again we're going into debate, and I'm trying to avoid that, Mr. Chair. The point I'm making is this: this is an political group that sits on behalf of the council to make the first decisions as far as these developments are concerned. As far as the final decisions and the planning decisions are concerned, that's way down the line.
Can I thank Councillor Davis and Councillor Short for coming out?
I think that's what you want to know. I'm just boycott, really.
But is that the view of the entire panel then?
Can I just say, sorry, Chris Evans with you, and then I'd like to just say something on about that.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah. What I was going to say was that I think most of the 45 members of the council would say you get to 16 sites, we don't want any of them. But at the end of the day, those 16 sites have been put up for developers to look at or put forward, if you like. But I've got a similar problem in Codden at the moment. You know, that there's an application now going in, and you will get opportunistic developers coming forward that will put an application, and it may be they may be coming in and putting an application for the Swanwick site. Because they are very easy to develop, far easier than a Cinder Hill or a Bush engineering works, right? Yeah. Because obviously you've not got to do all the remediation. So I can assure you that, if you like, all the councils have got problems with these sites, because, as you quite rightly said, they're either in Greenbelt or on green lands that we've all come to love, and they surround our villages, and they split up the communities from the towns. And certainly, I'm obviously backing for the ones at Codden, but I understand that it's not just me. You know, I'm here to represent Amber Valley, and that's what I'll do. And you know, to me, Swanwick is like Codden. Swanwick is like the one next to my village, between Waingroves and Ripley.
It sounds like we're all on the same side then, so it's quite easy really. You have the public behind you, you've got the public behind you.
What we can't do is what you wanted us to do in the petition, that's to take these sites out of the consideration. We can't do that. But can I just say one thing? I'm not against development on Greenbelt or even Greenfield or even Greenbelt.
You're not?
Because we would not be even looking at Cinder Hill. Because Cinder Hill is Greenfield and some of it is Greenbelt. So we can't be against it per se, because if we do the Cinder Hill development, that relieves the problems throughout the rest of the borough, including the town where I come from, which is Belper. We've got a similar sort of thing in Belper. People wanted to build on Greenbelt land. Now, it then comes down to a question of Greenbelt in Belper or Greenbelt at Cinder Hill. So we can't say no Greenfield, no Greenbelt, because there isn't enough brownfield land to do it. We've managed it successfully over the last years, as was said, 85% building on brownfield. That still meant we'd put some on Greenfield, not Greenbelt, but Greenfield. Now, the more brownfield we use, the less it is to use. So that percentage is going to go down. Don't shake your head. It is. That percentage is going to go down. Unless you knock every factory... No, not you. Gentleman here shaking his head. Unless you knock every factory down in the borough, that percentage has got to reduce.
It's a moving feast.
Yeah, the more you use, the less there is to use.
No, but it
keeps moving. Returns.
Keep moving.
Is there any contingency for brownfield site built into your figures? Potential sites that's going to come on?
The brownfield sites will be looked at first.
Yeah, we can't give you an absolute figure yet because there's further work to be done. But when we get to the stage where we can make some fairly clear positions clear as to, firstly, how many houses we need in the borough, that's still to be determined, and then secondly, how many of these sites will we have to consider? Once we've taken off the equation, as Rob said, empty homes and a realistic target for how many of these brownfield sites we can bring forward. It's got to be realistic, because if we plug figures out of thin air and say, well, let's redevelop all these sites because they're exactly the sites we should be developing, unless we can demonstrate there's a mechanism to do that, then again, when it comes to this examination, the developers will be waiting there to say, right, your brownfield target, it's all very well and good, but it's really high and it's just not realistic. So we have to be absolutely convinced that those sites will come forward, and that's they're challenging, the brownfield sites, but that doesn't mean we shirk the challenge.
Just a final question from the Parish Council from me, Steve. As a final question, I won't ask another one. Is it the intention of the Borough to seek the views of the neighbourhood plans before they issue the core strategy plan? In other words, are you going to take account of the plans being put forward by the towns and the parishes before it's issued?
Derek will answer that.
What we're conscious of is that obviously a lot of the neighbourhood plan processes have started.
Yes.
I think Ripley's the one that's now... Ripley have held a meeting, I suppose furthest along the line. I think a number of other people like yourselves are at the sort of those early stages of deciding to put it together. clearly what's going to be happening over the next sort of 18 months or so, in the time that we expect to bring this core strategy to a conclusion, the neighbourhood plans are going to be coming forward, and to some extent, some of them may be running in parallel, some may be a little bit further behind them. And clearly what we've got to make sure happens in that process is that we don't disregard what's coming up from the sort of bottom somewhere, but also make sure that there's nothing happening in the neighbourhood plans that then fundamentally cuts across what our strategy is. So there's going to be a bit of a two-way process to follow there, and that will need quite careful management, but yes, we will be looking at that very carefully.
Thank you very much.
Mark Hogg, and then I think we've got Mike Bagan.
Just like to go back to the SHLA, it's a very nasty acronym, but I mean, one of the main conditions, as I understand it, is the deliverability of a site. So a larger site is going to have much more constraints on it. If people get upset, want to go to public inquiries, then it's not going to be deliverable. So shouldn't the emphasis be looking at smaller sites which can be integrated into communities much easier?
The smaller sites are being looked at.
Smaller sites of 30 to 50. Yeah.
Smaller
But
sites are being looked at.
Not to the degree.
In the.
But then they're not being put forward because of this. This housing growth is based on sites of 500 plus.
No. Part of it. That's part of it.
That's what this consultation said, I'm sure. Mistaken on that.
Well, it's quite a good.
Can we have Mike Bagan next, please?
In my 3-minute spiel, I did ask 2 broad questions, and Derek's kindly answered in some detail the question regarding the 25,000 and the allocation that's needed. But no one seems to have come back on the second question, because based on what Rob said in his presentation, you're sticking effectively to the regional plan once the new bill comes into force later this year.
Yeah.
But then Nigel Mills has come back in his letter to you and said he's recommending that you go along the balanced migration route, which if you stick to the balanced migration route, you won't need any of the 16 sites. So I can't understand the discrepancy by where the council's coming from, and indeed what Rob said in his presentation regarding the government projection number, which is actually bigger than the current core strategy, and where the local MP is coming from, which is completely and utterly different from others like.
Councillor Mills is obviously entitled as an individual.
Absolutely.
Representative is entitled to give a view on it, and his view is one of a number of views that have been expressed about it. And he's set out a position as he sees it, and he's perfectly entitled to do that. Clearly what he won't have had, because we haven't had yet, is the benefit of this further work that we need to do to explore the latest government projections in terms of what they would need. And clearly we would need to go back, and he would need to go back, I guess, and look at what his position was when he set that out, whenever he made, I don't know when he made those comments.
Yeah. Well, actually, Derek, he actually made these comments after this document came out.
It was in response to that consultation, I think, yeah.
So he's already seen the latest government figures because he's actually a part of the government.
Well, he
and
has.
he's still saying we should go along balanced migration.
He's expressed a view, and it's...
Well, it's not just any old view, it is actually an MP of the government of the day.
Yeah, but with all respect to him as an MP, his view...
Not that that makes any difference in the big scheme of things, I appreciate that.
His view as an individual doesn't automatically carry more weight than any of you, because you're residents of Swanwick. Yes, he's expressing a view, in a sense, on behalf of the people of Amber Valley, but... You know, if he gives a particular view, we will listen to that, we'll take that into account, but that doesn't automatically mean that we've got to fall in line with that.
Right, okay. So someone...
That's no disrespect to him, but he's entitled
to... I have no problem with that answer at all, but in my simple mind, it would seem quite logical that someone from the council will go back to the local MP and say, that letter that's on your website is complete and utter tosh. Because what your numbers are a good 50% lower than our current plan, and probably what our plan will be in 2012 to 2026. Has that not occurred to anybody in the room to go back to tell our MP that he's completely and utterly at the wrong end of the stick?
Well, it wouldn't be, I don't think, for me to suggest...
I appreciate you're not a councillor, you're an employee of the council. I'm particularly looking at the Conservative councillors in the room that it might have occurred to one of the guys to think,
This
I better
has
go and have a
nothing
chat
to
with
do with politics.
No, it's not
Will you
politics.
forget?
It's completely and utterly to do with the numbers, councillor. The numbers are massively important, and you cannot keep turning around to say, we can't talk about this today, we can't talk about that today. It's unacceptable, mate. You cannot do it, because the numbers are massively important to all the 16 sites. And this one is one of the 16 sites.
But the thing is, we've got to defend the numbers at an inspection by an inspector. So we've got to make sure we get them right in the first place. And just because one MP says that's what we want, that will not stand up to the inspection.
Absolutely, I completely appreciate that.
Derek is right when he says we haven't got our figures yet.
Absolutely, but is it still not occurring to somebody from the Tory side of the council to have a word with the MP and say, our numbers are nowhere near your numbers?
I wouldn't tell our MP what to think about.
Well,
it's not my opinion. I certainly wouldn't tell that.
I hope that bit's been recorded.
This gentleman first, Emily.
Yeah, I want to go back onto brownfield sites again, and I know you mentioned contingencies and factories that's probably going to come up, and we have got a major problem obviously with employment, but I just wondered, in future, are you considering the other problem that we've got, which is public houses that are dotted all around Amber Valley that are vacant and obviously probably not in your figures? And if I can just mention one at Golden Valley, that public house there has been well, it's burnt down now, but it's got potential. That one site alone for probably 50, in excess of 50 properties. I don't know what the planning restrictions are, but there is these public houses all over Amber Valley that will probably never come back into use.
We will actually look at all sites, including pub sites. We can't talk about the one that you because there's a planning application in for that site. So we can't talk about it.
But
so,
they are
but they are included in our locations to look at.
Potential sites.
Potential sites.
Yeah.
I understand that some correspondence has been received, one in particular from Councillor Tudor from Swanwick Council. Has that been made available to other members of the group?
No, we've all got a copy of it.
They have, that's fine.
And one for the parish council.
Finally, I think we're going to wind up now.
Right. Just a question. You know, I'm encouraged by the fact you're looking at brownfield sites, etc. sort of thing. Now, supposing you've got the figures sorted out, and you've designated that we don't need any of these sites. All the houses we need, based on your figures, can be done on brownfield sites. But is that a possibility?
No.
Right. I'll be honest and say no.
Okay.
I'd like to think it was, but
right.
no.
But it could certainly take up a reasonable percentage, yeah?
Yeah. I'm not going to put a figure on because I literally don't have the information. But I wouldn't want to try and guess.
So you say, right, so you've got your plan worked out, and you take it to this inspection, and they approve it, okay? And then you put those sites out for development, and all the developers say, well, we don't like any of those sites because it's too much to develop them. Yeah. So what would happen then?
When we go to the examination of the core strategy, clearly what you've got there is an independent inspector who listens very carefully to all the various points that are coming forward, and he will listen and he will want to see from developers, not just whatever their arguments are for their particular site, but he will also want to test the deliverability of those sites. And what I said, I think in response to the gentleman over there, what's different about doing the plan this time, and we've not really had to do that this way, and it's probably quite right we have to do it differently there, is that not only do we have to say these are the sites that we prefer for the following reasons and argue why that's the case, but we also have to show that they are actually, there is a plan in place for them to be delivered. And that requires us to discuss with the developers what plans they have in place to make sure these sites, these homes actually get built. And if they can't convince us, it might be the best site in the world, if a developer can't convince us they're actually going to build them, and we have to be testing that fairly rigorously, then the site's not going to go forward. Because the last thing we want is loads of sites in, don't happen, because that's no good for
Right, but then that leads to the worry, doesn't it, that despite your best intentions, the greenfield sites are going to end up being used because the developers find those more attractive.
We have to make the plan as realistic and deliverable as possible, and again that's tested in an independent environment, and an independent inspector will form his or her own judgment on whether or not we've got that right, and that's the best we can do.
I think, Jim, if the inspector decides that that's a doable plan, then for up until 2026, any applications that come against the greenfield site, you can refer to that plan and say, I'm sorry, you know, in that plan, it says it's greenfield site or whatever.
Right.
We're far better position then to resist sites which we think are unsuitable, and we're less vulnerable then to that developer saying, well, if you don't like it, I'll just go to appeal. Because we can then go into that appeal and say, we've got a robust plan in place. It's not just the council who's saying it's a robust plan, an independent inspector has given it that sort of seal of approval, and that we believe would carry a lot of weight in an appeal.
That's what happened with the 12 sites, with the 12 houses that we turned down on appeal, and then we won an appeal. We could bring there our current plan and said, that's it, and the inspector agreed with us and said, no, we're not going to let it go through.
Chair, could I probably just end up with one question here?
Sure.
It's a small question. You said that these are potential sites. Could you
Which?
the 16, all the 16 are potential sites.
That's right.
And they're going through a consultation process. Could you explain for me why then that planning permission has been put in on some of them already?
Planning application?
Yes.
Well, because...
And I don't want you to talk about planning application, it's the basis.
As I said, John, it's opportunistic development
Yeah.
that can see
They're trying to get
fair.
Yeah,
they're trying to jump the system.
Yeah, I realise that, but you
That's
know,
right.
we are, aren't we?
No, yeah, you're trying to get us to take it out, we can't.
That's right. I mean, it works both ways.
No,
you
it
know.
doesn't.
But what
That's the
concerns
trouble.
me
You can't.
it is concerning. These are, you know, it's highlighted these potential sites, and yet certainly I know that maybe 2 have got planning applications in already. You know, this is people getting ahead of the
we are
game.
considering.
And that, yeah, and I don't want you to discuss them. But it is concerning when at this point in time, this is regarded as a consultation process which is not finished, and they are potential sites. So I make that point, and I think it's a valid point.
We have used that in appeals against developments where they're jumping the gun. We said, no, you're too soon, you've come in too soon.
I would like to make that point.
We have used that point in planning board. I'm the only member of the planning board on this committee. I can assure you that the planning board have turned sites down because they've come in, they've jumped the gun on this. There's one in Belfast where they turned down, and we wanted to appeal, but not necessarily on that reason, but we still wanted to appeal.
Thank you.
Thank you, residents of Swanwick. I do hope things are a wee bit more to it. We have listened to you. We will continue to listen to you. As I said from the beginning, I'm here to represent you, and so I will do. Thank you. Safe journey home.
Thank you. That was Nigel.
You want to say anything?
No. Just before we close, Chair, can I once again, as I started the meeting, to thank you for the opportunity of presenting our case, and that you know you will take forward our concerns. I know you've got other areas to see within Amber Valley. You know, we've been the first. I hope we don't sort of set the precedent that they'll be unruly like the rest of us. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.